Mental health, mental well-being, mental goals, summary, and audit or review. Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here. Welcome to day 318 of our Get Your Goals Annual Challenge. This month, we are reviewing each of the 9 areas of the life framework that I use and I teach and I share with everybody because it works for me, and I want to share the things that work for me, the tools, the tips, the strategies, everything that works for me in my life that makes my life work. I like to share those things. I also share the things that don't work, or the things that haven't worked for me. Doesn't mean they won't work for you, but if it's a good tool, but I haven't figured out how to use it yet, or I've had less than successful outcomes with it, I might share it still so that you can test it out and see if it's for you, because each of us are different, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for every person, right? When was the last time we had something that was actually for everyone on the planet? We think there is, but it's not true. So the 9-part area, we're on mental. We did physical yesterday. We did, I think, confidence and communication over the weekend. And we're going to do the rest of the areas of the life framework, the 9-part life framework I used, in order to discuss and talk about what did we talk about the month that we focused on that. And I've gone back through my journal. I have a journal that I keep for each annual challenge. I do the challenge right along with people. Any challenge that I ever do, I actually do the action items. I do the homework, or I do the exercises right along with you. Why? And I've done some of these exercises literally hundreds, if not 1,000 times in my life. But I know that every time I do them, I get better at it. I get better at using the tool, or I realize something, or I recognize something, or I have some aha moment that works for me. That's part of our mental well-being and our mental goals. Part of my mental goals is continuously improving. So I went back through my notebook and through my calendar, which is now attached to my notebook, because March is the month that we talk about our mental health and our mental goals and our mental well-being. And it was before I actually came up with sort of a structure to cover each one of the life framework areas. When I'm doing a challenge, it unfolds for me just like it unfolds for all of us. When we start a project, what it is in our mind at the beginning isn't necessarily how it goes throughout the entire process and how we implement it. So I'm going to talk about a summary of all the topics we talked about in March when we talked about mental health and mental well-being, this area of our life, and how we use that to get our goals and objectives in not only our, with respect to our mind and our intellectual and our desires with respect to what we want mentally, but we're going to review the goal that we set for ourselves using our 7-step goal process, as well as the SOAP framework, and check in and say, okay, have I taken care of that situation with respect to my soap that I soaked up, the improvement area that I wanted to improve? Did I take care of that, or do I need to go back and maybe soap it up a little bit more? Have I actually been, since it's back in March, have I been doing the things and the actions and the steps that I set in place with respect to that area and aspect of my life to make sure that I have my goal by the end of the year? Some of these areas we just talked about in October. We just finished up with contribution. And so I think it was contribution last. We'll have to look. Anyway, so it's been since March. We've had a lot of time to work on this particular area and tomorrow's area, which is our emotional goals. So what are some of the topics that we talked about? In February and March, I covered most of the topics that I talked about in the later months and later areas and aspects of our life, but in different order, totally different order. In February and March, I doubled up on our goal process and the topic for each of those, and I realized that it was too much. The videos were running too long, kind of like these this week. We'll run a little bit over 10 minutes, but I like to keep it under 10 minutes to make sure that this challenge is extremely doable for anybody. I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't have 10 minutes a day that they can listen to a video, and then another 5 to 20 minutes to actually do the thing that we're talking about, or think about as they go throughout the day the thing we're talking about. All right, so mental summary of mental topics. We talked about thoughts becoming things. The things that we think about show up in our life, whether we think we believe them or not. What we're actually thinking about, those are the thoughts, those are the things that come up and manifest in our life. I don't make these things up. I just know based on what I've learned over the decades, because I'm many decades old now, and what I personally experienced. And I share from my experience, and you have to ask yourself, is this true for me? Always be asking yourself, okay, I hear this, I see this. Is it true? Number one, is it even true, or does it make sense? And is it true for me? There's a lot of things in the world that are true and factual. I was married to somebody that thought his reality was the only reality on the planet. But each of us have our own reality. All right. I digress. Let's go faster. We talked about mental thoughts and beliefs. We talked about limiting beliefs and how to remove them. And again, one of my biggest things to remind myself of is if I have a belief, I just think it's a belief. I don't consciously realize it's limiting me from anything, right? I don't think that my beliefs are limiting. I just think my beliefs are my beliefs, and they are the formation of, they form my reality, right? They form my way of perceiving the world. We all think that way. Levels of consciousness. We talked about the superconscious, the subconscious, and our conscious mind. We talked about mindset. We talked about mental health. What do you want? We talked about, and then applied the SOAP framework to one area and aspect of our life. And I think mine was negative self-talk. I don't know that I wrote it down, but we'll see. So then we told our mental story using metaphors and analogy tools. We looked at mental options. We used the 10 and 3 tool. We looked at actions using the pros and cons tool. And then we looked at progress, asking yourself the question, how do you know? How do you know if you're making progress or not? How are you going to measure it? Are you going to have, what are your milestones going to be? Or what are your checkpoints going to be? Or when you take an action, how do you know if it worked or not, or if you just need to take more of it? We began talking about that and formalizing that process over the course of the year. We talked about mental well-being and what the definition is for you. Here we are, 10, 12 days into the month when we talked about what is mental well-being, what are mental goals, what is mindset, what are all these things to you, because your definition matters. And sometimes I've learned I need to tweak my definition of things. I have drastically changed my personal definitions of success and failure. We can talk about that if you want. I'm sure we've talked about it this year, but it's a great topic. It's a topic for more than a 10-minute discussion. We talked about memory, mindfulness. We used the lifeline exercise. We talked about imagination. We talked about ants, which I got this book from my son, who got it from his grandma, which is my mother-in-law, who recently passed. It's called Automatic Negative Thoughts, and it's a whole book. It's a really interesting book about how we have, depending on our personality and our experiences, automatic negative thoughts that pop up in mostly our subconscious. But the evidence of them shows up in our behavior, our results, our thoughts, our feelings, and the actions we will or will not take. Fascinating topic. I think I could study that topic alone for a whole year. Negative thoughts, we talked about them. We talked about cultivating optimism and the importance of looking on the bright side of things versus always looking at the negative side of things, and the impact that has on the outcomes you have in your life. We talked about our mental core values. We talked about identity. We spent a couple of days on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and the impact that has on our thoughts and beliefs and our mindset. We talked about thoughts and beliefs because mindset, mental well-being, mental health is totally driven by our thoughts and beliefs. We talked about our goal strategies, and during the run through of our 7-step goal process, on each of these days, we talked about a topic that has something to do with our mental health and our mental well-being to help us, and the impact it has on achieving our mindset and mental goals and objectives. So here's our 7-step process again. C to D, our current to our desired story, setting up our goal as a SMART goal, using that framework, breaking it down into steps, coming up with a strategy and plans that then those steps in step 5 identify milestones and ways, then we come up with ways to measure, are we achieving those steps or not, to get our overarching strategy. And then step 6 is resources. Actually, it's accountability, support, and resources, or accountability, resources, and support. What do we have? What do we need? What do we want? And there's a difference between what we need and want. And there, some of the things we have and some of the things we don't. But do we have to get all of them? No, we have to get the ones we need, but we'd like to get the ones that we want in terms of resources, accountability, and support. And then finally, how are we going to reward ourselves and celebrate that goal? And the topics we covered along with that were the 7 whys exercise, an extremely powerful tool. I had this discussion with my son-in-law the other day. Why? When we ask why about somebody else and their motives and why they would do something, we are never going to really understand, because the vast majority of people don't understand why they did something or do something or said something or act in a certain way. But if we ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Why, a series of 7 whys, it's extremely powerful and helps to motivate and drive us when we're maybe not wanting to do something that we say we want to do. Power Vision movie we talked about, We thought about thought triggers, or we worked on and talked about thought triggers. We talked about affirmations tool, which is, again, another one of my favorite tools. We did the life framework, and we talked about how our mental well-being and our mental health interacts with all the other areas of the life framework. And this is my favorite tool to share that. I did this in a coaching session one day. I drew this out for somebody I was explaining it to, and I've used it ever since because it's very indicative of how each area and aspect of our life impacts every other area and aspect of our life. And it creates this web of who we are. We talked about continuous improvement, how to automate that, and then why we even care about mental well-being. Why is it important to us? Because when we know something is important to us, we go about creating it in our life. So what's our action item today? Think about the topics we covered with respect to mental health and mental well-being. Go back and take a check on what is the goal that you set for yourself in the area of, mine was definitely removing and eliminating self-talk and replacing it with positive messages and positive self-talk. I'm surprised we didn't talk about flip switch on this topic, but we didn't. We talked about it later on. Maybe in motions, we talked about it. But we're just going to review that and check in with the goal that we set for ourselves in March. Are we making progress toward it? Are we looking to actually achieve it by the end of the year? And if not, what kind of tweaks and changes do we need to make to what we're doing in order to ensure that we do get the goal that we want and that we do create the mental well-being, the mindset, the things that we want, our identity, everything that has to do with our thinking by the end of the year. Again, remember, we're just doing this year's goal. And then I don't know about you, but I always set lifelong legacy goals. I have huge goals in each of these areas and aspects of my life, and they've been set, and some of them I've had for decades, but I work toward them and I break them down into bite-sized pieces. And every year, what do I need to do to make sure I'm going to achieve that goal in my lifetime, etc. All right, any questions? What do? You hit me up. Of course, there's a write-up in Guide 17 of the Get Up and Go Challenge private Facebook group. Otherwise, you can always ask. If you've got a question, chances are you're not the only one. So please ask it, and I'll make sure I answer it so everybody can know the answer. Don't have to be identified if you don't want anybody to know that you asked that question. Some people are embarrassed to ask questions, but when in doubt, ask. Right? I had another story for another day. Have a great day, and I'll of course see you tomorrow.